Hello friends, this is John in the United Kingdom broadcasting to Elton John fans throughout the world. Now I've been doing a series of videos on cover versions of Elton John songs, specifically the revamp and restoration albums. And today I'm looking at Two Rooms, a 1991 grouping of cover versions by some pretty big artists of Elton John songs. Now it's called Two Rooms. Why Two Rooms? Well, that's a track from 21 at 33. And that was all about the songwriting partnership of Elton and Bernie getting back together after a bit of a hiatus. So they've used that title for this album. Maybe the two rooms here are possibly Elton and Bernie in one, and the cover artist in the other room doing their interpretation of the songs on this album. Now, there's really a key quote about this album, and it comes from Kate Bush, who said, if you cover records, you should try to make them different. And that, for me, is my approach to cover versions. What is the point of them? Is it just a retread, or is the artist bringing something new to them? And certainly on the Restoration album, we saw quite a few radical versions of Elton John songs, which I was quite impressed with. This album got quite an uneven reception, and I know from comments that some of my subscribers sent in, it's not particularly popular. However, I would say on here there are two or three gems, quite a few sort of middle range songs, and one or two that I think are not particularly good. Anyway, let's have a look at them and see what we think. Track number one is by Eric Clapton, who chooses Border Song. Now, Eric Clapton, of course, has worked with Elton John on the One album on the track The Runaway Train, which is actually a pretty decent album track. There's a sort of funky brass intro on this. It feels a little bit leaden. There's some decent backing organ on here, and of course a very impressive guitar solo, as you would expect. It's a little bit by the numbers, this one, and it kind of lacks the hymn-like quality that Elton brings to the original. There's also a very good cover version of this by Willie Nelson on the Restoration album, which I actually prefer. This one for me, I'd say just average start to the album, and it's a 4 from me. Now, since the age of 11, Kate Bush apparently had been a fan of Elton John, so she was delighted to be given the opportunity to record Rocket Man for this. And she does stay true to her word and brings her own approach to this song. We've got Celtic pipes in the background. We've got a concertina. So really novel instrumentation. We've got a typically anarchic approach and a reggae beat kicking in. Who'd have thought? When she gets to that phrase, burning out his fuse up here alone, it's heavy and it's atmospheric, almost spine tingling. She's made this her own. She's maintained a kind of vulnerable lost voice as well, as if somebody stranded in outer space or something, that sort of feel. And she's even played with the structure, splitting up the refrain there. It's inventive and it's original. I think it's very good indeed. I'm going to give it 7. Now, I'm not reviewing here, but I will in another video. She has also covered Candle in the Wind, which was the B-side of this as a single, which did well in the UK, and I'll look at that separately. Now, the third track is Sting's version of Come Down in Time. Apparently this was a song that Sting used to play when he was going around the club circuit in his early days. His voice is just right for this song, which is one of my absolute Elton John favourites, of course, from Tumbleweed Connection. It's a great choice. Sting just using the bass and the piano on this, and that works really well. And his soft vocal also is very good in interpreting the lyric there. One of Bernie Taupin's absolutely best lyrics, this one. I don't find it quite as involving as Elton's version, but it's still a very decent cover, this one. I'm going to rate it as good and give it 6. Now, some furious rock guitar starts the next track, number 4. It's the Who's version of Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting. They create a real rock soundscape on this, and they sound like they're really enjoying themselves. They're slowing down at the start of the verses as well, so a little bit of structure going on there. And the refrain really rocks. But I suppose the question is, does it actually add anything to the original? It's a little bit on the predictable side, except where we get a little bit of flavour of Take Me to the Pilot coming in. So just an average one for me, 4. Now, I am a big fan of the Beach Boys, and I think they're absolutely a brilliant group, especially in their early work. But their version of Crocodile Rock, which is track number 5, is not too impressive, I'm afraid. They're without Brian Wilson on this, And the instrumentation I find a little bit thin on this. You think this would be an ideal track for them, that kind of 50s feel to this song, but it's just rather dull and doesn't work, I'm afraid. Below average for me, just a 3. Now, Wilson Phillips are an American pop group featuring the daughter of Brian Wilson. So we've got another Beach Boys link here. And their version of Daniel is track number 6. Now, I've got to say, it's a rather bland start to this with the first verse. However, the second verse does become more involving, and there's some more interpretation of the lyrics, which I like. The refrain picks up. There's a nice sax break in this, which gives it kind of sort of 80s sound. And there's a bit of the vocal is taken together as a group, so it's choral singing rather than a lead vocalist. Probably a bit like Bananarama used to do. It's just average for me, this one. I'm going to give it a 4. Right, so after a few sort of average tracks, things pick up with track number 7, which is Joe Cocker's version of Sorry Seems to Be the Hardest Word. Apparently he turned down Border Song in 1968, so it's a chance for him to redeem himself here. There's a great sax opening with the piano, and then Joe Cocker's voice comes in with those opening questions. What have I got to do to make you love me? These are really powerful, and he really feels the questions here. There's real passion in his voice, especially in the refrain. It's great stuff. He sounds almost on the edge of madness here from the frustrations he's finding in this relationship. And there's this brilliant sax accompaniment going on underneath. It's fantastic stuff. Really powerful track, this. I do like Ray Charles' cover of this song, but I think this one's even better. For me, it's excellent. I'm going to give it 8 out of 10. Now, Jon Bon Jovi does track number 8. It's Leave On, and he says it's a track he'd wished that he'd written. There's a strong opening vocal on this, but I find the refrain gets a bit too ferocious too early. We haven't quite got the way Elton interprets this song, and there's too much of a contrast between verse and refrain. But there's good driving energy, and when we get to Take a Balloon and Go Sailing, we don't quite match Elton's majestic delivery of that line. It's one of my favourites in the song. Great song, of course. It's not a bad version. Okay, it's fairly good for me. I'm going to give it 5. Track number 9 is by Tina Turner, The Bitch Is Back. She used to open her shows with this song, apparently, and she has recorded it in the 1970s. It was Grammy nominated, this song, which I find a little bit hard to believe. I'm not that keen on Tina Turner's voice, I've got to say, and I'm not that keen on this version. So I'm just going to give it a below par 3 for me. Number 10 is Philadelphia Freedom, interpreted by Daryl Hall and John Oates. And they chose it because they thought the lyrics summed up how they felt about Philadelphia. Daryl Hall has adjusted some of the phrasing in the verses, which is fair enough. And he's got a really good voice for this song. It does sound good. There's some nice harmonies on the Philadelphia Freedom words itself. The only negative point about this is that I feel the orchestral strings may be fake. They may be electronically provided. But there must be some session musicians out there, string players, who'd love to get involved in a project like this. Anyway, pretty good, I would say. Fairly good. I'll give it 5. Track number 11 is by Elton's old friend Rod Stewart, and he's got the greatest song of all, perhaps, Your Song. Some nice violin on this. Rod takes it fairly straight. I suppose, what could you do with this song, maybe? He doesn't bring anything particularly new to it, but it is a pleasant enough sound. Fairly good for me. I'll give it 5. Track 12 is by gospel singer Oleta Adams, and she's doing Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me. Now, somebody wrote into me and said this is their favourite ever Elton cover. Well, I think it's pretty good, and she plays the piano on this as well. And apparently it's something she sang at the start of her career. It's a very strong opening. She sticks to Elton's phrasing and melody. You could say it's fairly safe, I suppose. She could perhaps have gone for it a little bit more, perhaps in a kind of Aretha Franklin approach to the song. And the vocal is perhaps not as powerful as George Michael's version of this. Still, I would say pretty decent. I'm going to give it 6. Bruce Hornsby promises on track 13 that he's going to take this song to another place musically, and the song is Madman Across the Water, because he likes the dark mood of it. Well, it's quite a boast. Does he fulfill that? Well, I would say he does in the interesting and impressive jazz piano improvisations he provides on this. They're very interesting, good to listen to. There's some good interplay with the percussion on this. The vocal is not quite manic enough for me, and is a little bit uneventful compared with Elton's wonderful version of this, where you do get that sort of manic, desperate feel to it all. Anyway, it's still pretty good, I would say. I'm going to give this one a 6. Track number 14 is by Sinead O'Connor, and this is her version of Sacrifice. Just with the keyboard on this, there's a little bit of harp introduction, which could be from a keyboard as well. She employs a sort of ghostly, mysterious and tender voice. There's a slow build-up. She respects the searching lyrics, and of course it's a gorgeous melody anyway. A little bit of synth bass coming in on the chorus, a little bit like Elton's version of Ticking, actually, from Caribou, which is a great song. There's a spine-tingling second verse, especially when she sings When Jealousy Burns. And a fantastic final refrain. Yeah, for me, this is how to cover a song. She feels the lyrics and she finds the meaning in there, and it just shows what a great song this is anyway. A little bit of a second voice coming in towards the end, which is probably her own voice over the top. So, you know, this is the standout track on the album for me, and one of the very best Elton John covers. For me, brilliant. 9 out of 10. Track 15 is Phil Collins singing Burn Down the Mission. He thinks he chose this because it kind of sums up Elton's early work. Phil Collins is on the vocals, drums and piano. Steve Winwood is involved in organ. I find the choice of electric piano on this rather than a genuine piano keyboard a little bit troubling. I'm not sure that quite works. The vocals are okay, and they're delivered passionately, and the instrumental break rocks well in this, and the drums drive it along. I'd say fairly good. Going to give it 5. Now, the album ends with George Michael's version of Tonight, and of course George Michael has worked a lot with Elton John, and he says this is possibly the most moving song he'd ever heard at that stage when he bought the album Blue Moves. This was recorded live at Wembley Arena in 1991, which is slightly to its detriment in a way, because the orchestra seems to be provided by a rather cheesy electric piano. This really needs a full orchestra backing, so that detracts slightly from it. However, George Michael's vocals are brilliant, and there's some superb phrasing. He's such a great phraser of lyrics, I think, and getting that emotion into his voice. He reaches all the high notes that Elton did on Blue Moves as well, and it's a commanding performance. I would say it's a worthy cover by a great artist. Nice bit of acoustic guitar at the end as well. Very good for me. I'm going to give it 7. So total marks for the album, there is 87 marks for 16 tracks. That gives us an average of 5.44 per track. Let's have a look now at my spreadsheet of cover versions of Elton John songs. Right at the top there, we've got Coldplay's version of We'll Fall in Love Sometimes. But from Two Rooms there, we've got Sinead O'Connor's Sacrifice getting 9. Then there's several on 8. Honky Cat by Leanne Womack, Border Song Willie Nelson, Madman Across the Water by Brandy Carlisle, not the Bruce Hornsby version on this particular album, and then Joe Cocker's Sorry Seems to Be the Hardest Word. So I've got about 47 cover versions listed so far. Down the bottom there, a few I'm not particularly keen on. Tina Turner, Mary J. Blige, Miley Cyrus, but other opinions are, of course, most welcome. How does that fit in my overall rating of Elton John albums? Well, we've got Tumbleweed Connection at the top there on 7. But when we go down, we see Two Rooms coming in there in 20th place, actually, which is perhaps slightly higher than I might have imagined at the start. So that's it from me. What do you think of this album? What's your favourite track on it? Do you like these cover versions of Elton John songs? If you know of any other good ones as well, please put your comments below and I'll do a follow-up video. That's it for now. Don't forget, we're still standing.